Hello, is that Anthony?
It is. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Outstanding. Well, welcome aboard. It's great to have a guest. I see that you've had a busy day as well. You were on Porky's Corner this morning, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Yes, I was on. I think we did two sessions.
Ah, good show. I haven't seen them yet. I've been busy myself this morning, but this afternoon I thought I would sit down and watch videos. You've got an interesting background going on there. I can see maybe that's
I
your
don't know what
face.
that is. It's not mine. I don't know what it is. I don't know
Uh,
how it's.
okay,
What? what
it's a fellow wearing headphones, and there's a beach scene behind, but the fellow wearing
I don't know why
headphones
that is.
the fellow
Uh,
wearing headphones is upside down. So I think it is you because the lips move and the sound comes out, but you're upside down. So
Let me try and deal with that. Hold on a second. If I
okay, for
do,
sure, no worries whatsoever.
there you go.
There we
I
go.
don't
That's
know why. I
marvelous,
don't.
marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Right.
So,
I
but,
don't know why it was doing that. I haven't. I don't have any backgrounds.
But for a second, I believe that was your face wearing headphones, which has confirmed one thing. You're actually not Duke Mackenzie. Somebody was saying on Porky's Corner that you sounded like Duke Mackenzie. So I've been
Duke
telling.
Mackenzie. I've also had another one. I don't know if you watch. There's a guy called Ultra Tech that does. I don't know if he does podcasts, Bob, but he does boxing watch-alongs, and he's from South London. And I was told that I'm the posh version of him.
Ah, I see. Well, I was. I was telling all the subscribers here that Duke Mackenzie was coming on board, and now
you,
you've blown that
you
out of the
devil,
water.
you,
Well,
you devil.
for those that will be watching this video, let me give you a proper introduction. So, Anthony Austin is one of the regular and very well liked guests on the UK YouTube channel called Porky's Corner. And Anthony, I understand that you're a retired chemist and also a financial services fellow, but that you've been a lifelong fan of boxing. Have I gotten that right?
Correct. I met Ali back in 1979 in a place called Guyana, and I was into boxing before that. But once I met the great man himself, I mean, it was always going to go one way, wasn't it? You think, right, I'm going to follow this sport. So yeah,
Absolutely. Well, we both share a great deal of respect and admiration for Muhammad Ali. And you'll see behind me, I've got my Muhammad
oh
Ali.
yes, the famous
Um,
picture with him
that's
over Liston too.
that's right. I was slightly disappointed with this product that I bought off Amazon. It arrived in a very creased up condition, and it wasn't exactly as I wanted. But I thought, out of respect to the great man, and since you and I are such big fans of his, I would put it up behind me here today.
Thank you very
So,
much. What a resume. That's why. We might
absolutely.
we might talk about that fight a little later, actually, in this.
Absolutely, we may well. Just again, so people watching, I've met Anthony not in person, only telephonically, since we are connected via the
We're going to
Porky.
change that.
Yes, we will have to, indeed.
We-
It's not exactly that we can nip down the road to each other. We're separated by
oh,
the Atlantic
miles, isn't it?
Ocean and a continent. But we've spoken a couple of times, and we're on a WhatsApp group. And our claim to fame, if you like, is we're both on the Porky's Corner rotation of guests, together with many others, all of whom know more about boxing than I. But it's been my privilege to have gotten into the group and to chat with a number of folks, including Anthony, who's very kindly agreed to come on board Canada's boxing channel here today. We don't have a specific agenda to talk about, but I had suggested to Anthony that we would speak about some of the topical things. And I think one of the most topical that I can think of at the moment, Anthony, I don't know if you agree with me, is how shall I put this? The scandalous affairs associated with reffing of a couple of recent fights, Crocker and Donovan being one. And I was wondering what your thoughts on Crocker and Donovan were.
Well, Bob, we've had three scandals in a row, and the Crocker Donovan is the second scandal. And I just want to say to all the subscribers and those watching Canada's Boxing Channel, I was myself, Bob, Jerry, Andy, we're all in the sort of Porky's Corner WhatsApp group watching the fight together. We're all rooting. I think I was neutral. I can't remember who you rooting for, Bob.
Well, I actually had a little bit of money, a massive $5 Canadian on Donovan, and that was purely because he was ever so slightly the underdog in Canada. I, truly
Right.
speaking, had no dog in the fight, and I didn't care who won, other than I had $5 Canadian, or about £3 sterling, on Donovan. So I was biased to the extent of £3.
Right. I was a neutral. I knew Jerry was going for Donovan. And I think because Crocker had Billy Nelson as a trainer, I think Andy was going for Crocker, correct?
That's right.
So
That's
we
right.
had a group of guys that just wanted to see a great fight. And we wanted the fighters to tell us who was the best, which we got right until the end when the referee, as we now know, disqualified Donovan. And the most poignant part of that evening was the what the F's from every single person at the same time, because obviously we were watching it on pay-per-view and streaming live. And it was just, let me use a pun. There's a huge black eye for boxing. And I'll tell you, I'll go into depth as to why I think it was a black eye for boxing, Bob. As boxing fans, clearly we were all enjoying the show. Jerry had told us that another guest on Porky's Corner, a guy called Julian, had been saying, watch Paddy Donovan. He's coming up very, very nicely. He's a good fighter and he's got great fundamentals. And what that guy showed on Saturday was the true essence of boxing, which is to hit, but not be hit. He has a southpaw stance. And what I liked about him is he counteracted Crocker coming forward with a high guard on his head by spinning off a quick 1-2, stepping to the right-hand side, and then letting him have a beautiful left right down the pipe, right? And he
Absolutely.
was doing that all night. And Crocker proved in the same essence that he's a very one-dimensional fighter because he couldn't adjust to those tactics. Now, Bob, what I thought about it was utter dismay because here we have two fighters sorting out a conundrum and saying to everybody, well, I'm better than this guy. And then you had the interaction of the referee destroying it for everybody, including the fighters, because that is an outrageous piece of refereeing. My view, Bob, and I think I said this to you, I think it was yesterday or certainly in the group, was that the referee, in my opinion, let his ego and got caught up in the atmosphere that was in the Belfast arena. That's what happened, because the reactions that, the path he went down were emotional. And as a referee, you're not there to make an emotional investment in the fight. You're there to officiate and make sure that everybody gets a fair shake. And that did not happen on Saturday. And that is to the detriment of boxing. And it happens too often, in my opinion.
I think you're right. I certainly felt as though there was a point in the fight where the referee stopped being even-handed, and I'm not sure if it was when he awarded, but certainly by the time he took a point away from Donovan, I think that he had shown that he was favoring Crocker. I'm not sure if it was from the get-go or if it was sort of like this, about the headbutt
2 rounds in,
warning.
I think. Two
Pardon?
rounds in, I think.
Yeah,
Bob,
yeah.
I tell you how detrimental that was to the fight. Fighters, and I've had one white collar fight. Fighters know when they are evenly matched, when they're outmatched, and where the fight's going to go. And after 2 or 3 rounds, Crocker knew that he was in there with a slickster, right?
Yeah.
He's got the heavy artillery, but again, as the great man behind you said, what is the point of having all the heavy artillery if you can't land it? And what
Yes.
was being shown was that if he can tag Donovan, there will be questions answered. But clearly, Donovan was way too slick. He was too good a boxer. He wasn't a level, he was several levels above Crocker. Now, when you're overmatched as a fighter, you then have to think, well, okay, I don't want to get knocked out here. You need to look for a way out.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes very obvious that whenever there was either a clash of heads or anything like that, the referee was favoring him. So, what would you do if you're in a very competitive fight that means the world to you and you don't want to lose? If you realize that any altercation is of benefit to you, you suddenly become a football player, isn't it? All of a sudden, oh, come on, ref, he's done this.
Yeah, you become an amateur
Opponent,
dramatics thespian.
so,
Yes.
so what you find is that you have what I call ever decreasing circles, Bob. So the reason for the head clashes wasn't because Paddy Donovan was being dirty. That is not what I saw in over 40 years of watching boxing. The reason for the head clashes was Crocker himself had one gear, and that was to have a high guard, lean forward, and walk his man down, hoping to catch him. That's all he was doing. And Donovan's antidote for that was to stand his ground, right?
Yes.
Throw a 1-2 to open up his guard, pivot to the right, and then hit him down the pipe with the left hand, which was working beautifully. The problem is that if he stands his ground, the heads are inevitably going to come together. And
Yes.
in my view, I think the referee lost control of the fight when he first gave Paddy Donovan a point off, because what he should have done is stopped the fighters, call a timeout, and said to both of them that he doesn't like the heads. Both of them need to change something, because this is not a head-butting competition, it's a boxing match. And he needs to tell both fighters that he's not scared to take a point off of both of them. Because what I read in that fight, because I watched it obviously with you guys, and then I watched it back again, is that every time Paddy Donovan got penalized, it emboldened Crocker,
That's it.
right,
Yes.
to
Quite.
keep going with the same tactics. And the point is that why wouldn't he? He's trying to win the fight,
Of
even
course.
though he's an outmatched boxer.
The other thing that I thought, and I haven't raised this with you, I just would like to know what your perspective is. I think that the way that the referee behaved made it a far worse scenario all round, but specifically, it caused Paddy Donovan to lose some of his own self discipline because I think amateur psychologist, I think that Paddy Donovan realized he was fighting two men in that ring, and he began to lose his own composure and self discipline, which I think may well have led to the late blow. And you could see it sometimes. Paddy Donovan he dropped his hands to his side and he's looking at the corner like, WTF, what's going on here? What's your perspective on that?
I agree with you. What was a firefight of a fight? The referee acted, as the Americans and the Canadians would say, as gasoline, and as
Mm-hmm.
we in the English would say, as petrol, because he didn't control the fight in an even-handed manner. Because what you had is Paddy Donovan thinking, as you say, WTF, whereas you had Crocker thinking, oh, this is not so bad. I'm getting the rub of the green here. So it was only going to go towards one way, which it did, which was chaos. And that is just poor officiating. That's it. There's no other reason for that because one, he didn't even need to disqualify the lad. Think about it. This is a world title eliminator. There's a huge rivalry. Paddy Donovan is he from Limerick? Is it in Ireland? He's certainly he's a Southern Ireland kid.
He's from the Republic of Ireland. Yes,
Right. And then you've got Crocker, who's a Northern Ireland kid. So there's a little bit, according to Jerry, there's a little bit of sectarian atmosphere. But one thing I will say is that it was a cauldron in there. So it was excellent. And a point I've heard you make, excuse me, Bob, I've heard you made earlier was that often when you're in the heat of battle and everything else, you're not going to hear things. And it's my opinion that neither fighter heard the bell at the end of the fight. And why do I say that? I say that because when the referee finally intervened, both fighters were still fighting.
Absolutely. I mean, the issue of auditory exclusion, where you are in a stressful environment and you actually don't hear something, is very well documented. It's well documented with respect to police shootings, for example, where an officer draws their sidearm and they have no idea how many times they are firing because they don't hear the sound and they are so focused on the exercise of use of force that they really don't. They really every other sense is sort of suspended, and I believe this happened in this particular boxing match.
Correct. I think I said it earlier this afternoon. I was at the tremendously exciting Gerald McClellan Nigel Benn fight. It is the most exciting event I have ever been to in my life, and the irony is that I had brought one of my work colleagues. I used to work as a broker in the city. And I was saying to everybody, there's a fight on, we've got to go. And I'm the only one in the dealing room who'd actually go to boxing. And one of the guys who was a great broker as well, he said, Anthony, I'll go with you. So I took him to that fight. That was the first fight he had ever been to. And I remember turning to him saying, they're not all like this. And here's the key point that illustrates your point about the auditory exclusion. I didn't hear the bell because he turned round to me at the end of each round and said, Anthony, the reason that they stopped the action is it for the crowd to get their breath back. I said, no, they're rounds. But I didn't hear the bell. And the point is the atmosphere in London Arena that night was absolutely electric, exactly like what we saw in Belfast on Saturday. And if, for example, Crocker had stopped fighting and then that final right-hand blow, which felled him, was then delivered, I would say that's fair grounds for the referee to make a disqualification because clearly his opponent has stopped fighting, so his opponent has heard the bell, but that wasn't the case.
No,
both of them were fighting.
It wasn't the case, and the referee was out of position. The referee was in no position to aid Crocker. He should have been able to jump in, surely, had he been in position, and then he could have taken his time and determined what the appropriate course of action could be. But it seemed to me, and I'd like your perspective on this, that the referee had essentially lost his own temper and became emotional about it. And it was some version of, I've warned you once, I've warned you twice, now fuck off out of here. It seemed to me that the referee was emotional at the time he made the decision to disqualify Donovan. What's your take on that?
I'd agree with you. The referee was that late. It reminds me of a particular fight, and this one's going to make you laugh. Do you remember Ray Mercer and what's his name? The John Wayne's nephew. Who did he fight? Ray Mercer and
Tommy Morrison.
Correct. Do you remember how late that referee was? I mean,
yes, yeah.
Yes. Well, he's about 10. he was about 10 punches too late when Tommy Morrison was taking a murder
Yeah.
from standing up.
Merciless Ray Mercer.
Right. And even Ray Mercer at the end of that fight actually said, come on, the referee was a bit slow. Somebody could have been killed in there. That was how slow the referee was in separating Crocker and Donovan in this fight. That was outrageous. That's his incompetence. It's nothing to do with the fighters. And I absolutely agree with you, because what's happened is you saw a crescendo building where what he was doing is he was increasing every single time, bit by bit, the punishment on Paddy Donovan. And I just think it's terrible.
It
And the
was.
reason it's terrible is he didn't gain control of both fighters, because by doing that, what it opens him up to is allowing Crocker to game him, which is what
Absolutely.
happened. And he got thrown out.
There's two
You
things.
had
Two things. It allowed Crocker to game him, but it also um, uh, allowed or permitted in some way Donovan's lack of self-discipline. And I think that Donovan, when he can calm down and recombobulate and discuss with his team, he will appreciate how much self-discipline is so important. And there's a we'll get to it in a minute, I'm sure. But the Tank Davis and Roach fight, Roach fight shows the difference. Roach was very composed, even though something outrageous had happened to him.
more outrageous than this. Yeah,
Indeed,
I agree with you, Bob. What I think I'm going to give Paddy Donovan the benefit of the doubt. He's a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first World Championship eliminator. He's getting the better of the guy, yet still the referee, for whatever reason, is being the second man in the ring that is against him. What I think should have happened is his trainer, Andy Lee, because this was happening all through the fight, Bob. His trainer, Andy Lee, in the corner should have been like some of the all-time trainers that you have said, the Angelo Dundees. Remember the Angelo Dundee?
Yeah.
You're blowing it, kid. You're blowing it, kid. That is what was needed in this fight. And all he needed to say to Paddy was, Paddy, you've got this fight. The referee isn't doing you any favors. Do not give him any excuse to penalize you more. Take a breath. You've got it. The kid isn't going to lie. Now, in my opinion, if Andy Lee had stepped up and had his
like
Angelo Dundee moment,
a father moment,
the Angelo Dundee moment with Sugar Ray Leonard in the Hearns fight, if he had that, the kid wins the fight.
Yeah.
Right? That's my opinion. So I'm not going to blame him, because he's in there. His blood is up. The adrenaline's flowing. And he's in a hyper-masculine sport.
Yeah.
I've been there, right?
Yeah.
I cannot blame him. But what I will say is that Andy Lee is an extremely competent trainer, an extremely competent second. Are you telling me that he couldn't see what you were seeing? What I was seeing?
I'm sure he could.
Jerry was seeing, and what Andy was seeing. We were all saying in the chat exactly the same things. We actually said together, why is the referee only penalizing Donovan? It's outrageous.
I know, it was very, very difficult to understand. But you know what else is difficult to understand? In fact, more difficult to understand, and I think it's a suitable time for us to segue into it, is the referee's decision in the 9th round of the Tank Davis fight. Now, correct me if I'll say a few things and then correct me if I've gotten any of this wrong. So a flurry of shots are launched towards Davis, and whether it was a right hand that connected or a left hand is debatable. Davis seemed to back away and then kneel down. I didn't see his gloves touch the canvas, but he definitely knelt.
Took a knee.
And then he turned his back to the referee and he scooted off to his own corner for assistance. He put his head through the ropes, and his cornerman was coming up the steps there with a white towel in his hand. The referee had started a count, and then, as we know, the count was abandoned. Davis comes back from his corner, having had his face wiped off. He has a conversation to the referee in a game where seconds count. He then, essentially gives the referee some sort of, biography or recites some sort of verse to him or something. And the referee basically says, well, that looks bad. It could have been a knockdown, and then allows the fight to continue. Make this make sense for me, because I can see this as being either a 10-8 round or a 10-7 round or a disqualification for Tank Davis or a technical knockout victory for Roach. What I cannot understand is how the fight was allowed to proceed without there being any of the aforementioned going on. Make this make sense for me.
Right. I think I used a term earlier today, and to me, that was corruption so blatant. It was one of the biggest outrages I've seen in a very long time, decades, right?
If I can just stop you on that one, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think that this was a more blatant example of gross incompetence or corruption than there was in the Donovan case. In the Donovan case, I think the referee had become emotionally involved for whatever reason and lost his temper almost. But in this case, the referee seemed to be giving up his role to Tank Davis, the A-side fighter. And so please continue to try and make sense of this.
Right. I'll tell you what, let's bring in the fight whose picture is over your shoulder. You remember, just before that picture was taken, what had happened is that was Ali's phantom punch, and Liston goes down, correct?
Yes.
The referee, as we both know, was Jersey Joe Walcott in that fight. And
a great fighter, but not a great referee.
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever refereed a fight before. No. So he hadn't. He was inexperienced, and for whatever reason, there was an actual visible confusion. He didn't know what to do. Yeah. And what happens is that he then left the fighters after Liston had got up. They both engaged, and he went to the timekeepers, and they said, well, hang on, he's been down for 10, the fight's over. And then he comes back in and stops the fight, which is very apt that you've got that picture there. The reason I mention this, Bob, is this. The referee we are talking about is an extremely experienced referee that knows what he's doing, but he's famous for carrying out his duties in a very flamboyant way. So he knows what to do. Mm-hmm. And I, as a boxing fan, is never gonna buy that he sees a fighter after a punch take a knee. In fact, if you look carefully, Tank Davis looks at him after the punch. There was a delay. Then he takes a knee. That is a sign of distress.
Yeah.
Right? And after that, he then gets up. He's clearly not completely hurt. He then gets up and walks to his corner and gets some assistance.
Which is against the rules. There's there's absolutely not permitted to receive assistance from the corner unless you've been instructed by the referee to go there.
None of your corner staff can intervene in the fight. If you remember Carl Froch against Lucien Butte, when it looked that the referee was stopping the fight, and a certain Eddie Hearn jumped in the ring because Carl Froch was his guy, ran across the ring and was hugging Carl Froch. And he turned around and then realized that the referee was giving Butte a count and the fight was not over. And you saw how quickly he got out of that ring because he realized that he could get Froch disqualified. Right?
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
My view is that this is a title fight. The referee, you don't really want the referee to disqualify anybody unless he absolutely have to. And in my view, this is what should have happened at that stage from a very competent referee. Very, very competent. You you've seen that referee in so many fights. You
Yeah.
see the stoppages he makes and everything else. There is no excuse. He is being influenced by something other than the boxing rules, in that opinion, and it's blatant. Sorry,
And
I call it out.
I
I
agree.
call it out because that's what I saw. Now, what do I think should have happened? Tank takes a knee. The referee starts the count and continues that count. He continues that count to 8. And what he should have then done is ask Tank, is he okay? Wipe down his gloves because his gloves, etc., etc. What he should have done, given that Tank has gone to his corner and got intervention, he should have called time and said to the corner, this is not, this is a flagrant breach of the rules. And what I could do is disqualify a fighter. But here's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to take a point off of him. And what he should have done, in my opinion, is turned around to all the judges with Tank by his side and said 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, which makes that round a
10-7.
10-7 round. And that, in a close fight, really does two things. One, it asserts his control on the fight, which ensures that there's an even kill because no fighter is going to start messing around and testing his authority. And number two, in my opinion, it's a just reprimand for the indiscretion that happened. Because if you disqualify Tank, then everybody's going to say, well, Tank would have come on. You're not disqualifying him. What you're doing is taking a point off because his corner intervened without his permission. And the reason for the other point off is because he took a knee.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
He could have complained to the referee not taking a knee, right? And the referee might then call time, or the referee might motion them together. But the thing is, you're in a fight. And what I saw there was the A-side fighter refereeing his own fight. And I've actually never seen that before.
I've never seen it. I think it sets a terrible precedent because this sends a message to every A fighter going forward that if you're in difficulties, you can do what Tank Davis did. You can buy yourself some more time. And it was the most flagrant breach of the rules that I've seen. And I've started watching boxing in the 1960s. So, you know, some substantial period of time back. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, Bob, that was
it was flagrant.
Terrible letdown for all fans. And the reason it's a terrible letdown for all fans is that I said on Porky's Corner earlier, I gave an illustration, and the illustration I used was Usain Bolt. And Usain Bolt burst onto the scene in 2008 with that extraordinary 100 meters that he ran in 9:69. But the most extraordinary part of it, Bob, as you well remember, is that the last 30 meters, he wasn't even running. He had his hand on his chest and his arms down because he had ran away from the 7 of the world's fastest men. There was daylight between them.
Yeah.
So he was in his pomp then. He then, the next following year, followed it up with a 9.5 at the Berlin World Championships. And everybody literally lost their shit. They just couldn't see a guy running so fast, slowing down. Now, what I actually said to Porky earlier today is the next biggest meet after that was the 2011 World Championships. And what you found, Bob, was this. They all, obviously, Bolt and all the fast men had all got to the final. So this was a rerun of the 2009 World Championships in Berlin. And what happens? Usain Bolt false starts.
Yes, I remember that. And then he ripped his shirt off, didn't he?
Exactly. And he ripped his shirt off. And why did he rip his shirt off? He was Mr. Athletics. He ripped his shirt off because he knew he was going to be disqualified.
Yeah.
And what we saw, Bob, on Saturday in the Tank Davis fight was Tank Davis doing the equivalent of false starting, and then the referee saying, oh, we didn't see that. Everything's good. You could go on and do the race. That is what we saw. Absolutely. And in my opinion, it underlines the complete integrity of the sport that we love.
Yeah, it was very, very harmful to the sport. And sadly, this morning I saw the New York State Athletic Commission has decided to abrogate their responsibility, and they have said that they are the time period for the transmission of the review package was held up, and so they can't review it due to a technical reason. They didn't really get into what they can't review. I mean, I can't imagine it's we haven't been able to see the film footage because clearly the whole world did, but they're relying upon a technicality that the review package didn't get transmitted to them in time. So what I'm seeing is that the New York State Athletic Commission is washing their hands of it, doing a Pontius Pilate, and not doing the right thing, which is, quite frankly, to reverse the decision or no contest out the fight. There are any number of things they could do, but they're clearly not prepared to get involved in this, which again speaks to the use of the C word rather than pure incompetence.
Yeah. I will double down on that point, Bob. I'll tell you why. It has been reported, and what I'm going to do is listen to the end of the fight again and turn up the volume on it so I could hear it. But it was also reported that Gervonta Davis was mocking Roach at the end of the fight, saying,
"You won't get a win on the cards."
Decision anyway.
Yeah.
So here's some questions I want to throw back to you, Bob. How does he know that? Number
Foregone
one.
conclusion.
Right, yeah. How does he know that? And number two, why is boxing doing this to us? What are we watching?
Well, it's preposterous, and that's a conversation we are going to have next time. If you will be prepared to come back next time, because I see the little time counter in the top right hand corner of my screen.
2 minutes we got. Just under 2 minutes.
Yeah,
just under 3 minutes rather.
We're running out of time. But yes, I mean, I think there's a strong argument to be made for there to be a professional cadre of referees who are salaried and not hired on by the promoters. And I think that there's an absolute need for referees to be required to prepare a full written report for each of the fights they referee, not just for those where there's been controversial issues. The standard of refereeing needs to be higher. It needs to be removed from the promoters, and it needs to be accountable to its own governing body. That would be
transparent. It's terrible.
Shine a light on things. If you shine a light on things,
the rats scatter.
Truth will thrive in sunlight. But yes, no, it was an absolutely shocking weekend. I don't know, why does boxing do this to us? We're fans. It's a sport we love, and it's sometimes turned into a sport we love to hate because
correct.
It's
the cocaine of sports, isn't it? Because we had such a great high on Saturday when we were all watching the Paddy Donovan fight, and then that came crashing down when we realised he had been thrown out and DQ'd. We couldn't believe it.
I know, it's the emotional roller coaster of being a boxing fan. It's and of course in the previous weekend, I guess it was in Riyadh, we saw the Hamza Shiraz matter, which when you see so many instances of either incompetence or whatever, it really
corruption.
sort of
let's call it right, corruption.
Yeah,
we've got less than a minute, Bob, haven't we?
It causes us as fans to sort of, shake our head and cry and I, just sort of almost want to give up. It's which is a terrible thing, because when you have people who are serious fans saying, "Look, this is not what we're wanting to watch," it has a terrible effect on the sport that we have spent virtually our entire lives being fans of. So,
and that's it, isn't it, Mr. Bob? Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.
And I'd love to come back.
Absolutely. I'll send you an invite, and I'd love to have you back. I know that you're going to be on Andy's Cavern fairly soon, I understand. So,
I hope so.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I will definitely watch that. And thank you for confirming you're not Duke McKenzie. If Mr. McKenzie is watching, he's also welcome to come on the channel.